my name is Tait Schnitzler. I currently work full-time for Nationwide Children's Hospital. I am attending classes at night to continue my education and further advance in my current career. I am also the Vice President of a travel softball organization, which mentors young athletes not only in their athletic, but academic abilities as well. I am also a family man who believes that family is a gift that lasts forever and a key source that shapes us continuously throughout our lives. The first term I have chosen is emotions are physiological. As it states in the readings, emotions are multidimensional because every emotion has several components. The physiological component is one that I have chosen to touch on as this is a term that I often relate to. With being the husband and father of a very active family that does a lot of traveling, oftentimes in different directions, at the same time. My oldest daughter and I, at any given weekend, can be traveling 1 to 2 hours or even another state away for her softball tournaments, while my wife and youngest daughter are traveling the complete opposite direction for her tournament. So you can imagine how important communication is in our lives. As much as I hate to admit it, the cell phone is a huge part in the closeness of our family, and how we know that we are all safe and sound. Now, how emotions play a physiological role in my particular life is very easy to explain. When we are traveling such great distances, we always check in as we are on our travels. My wife and I usually have our daughters send messages or call while we are driving to make sure that we are all safe and there isn't any type of issue that is arising. I am more of the protective husband and father. So when an instance arises that my youngest or my wife may not answer or respond to our messages, I begin to worry immediately. The thoughts of, did they forget their phones? Are they having car trouble? Have they been in a wreck? Start polluting my thoughts. About the time this is all racing through my head, I'm feeling helpless, scared of the unknown, and on the edge of my seat. My back is tense, and I just plain feel sick to my stomach. And about the time I finally hear from them, I feel so exhausted and drained mentally and physically from the worry, but it's part of what makes who I am. The next term that I have chosen that represents me is avoiding communicating in anger. For me, this goes hand in hand with emotions are physiological. As it states in the text, when someone else's words or actions upset us, it can be very easy to lash out by sending a nasty text or posting words of anger. This may make you temporarily feel a little bit better, but the words you have spoken can continue to hurt the other person for longer than we realize. It is truly important to try to keep this in mind, as today is a gift and tomorrow is never promised. How this ties into emotions or physiological, for me, is very easy. I've been in situations and spoken words out of anger that I regret, as most of us have at some point in our lives. But for me, when I've done this, and then my family is heading in separate directions, my emotions torture me even more when I am unable to speak with my wife or daughters, for fear that I may never get to apologize for the things that I've said. Another term that I feel represents me is communicating effectively. Effectiveness describes how well your communication achieves its goals. I feel that as the head coach of my daughter's team and vice president of the organization, this is something that is imperative in this position. Communicating not only effectively, but appropriately when leading a team of young, developing athletes is vital in their success and in their losses. I feel that being able to communicate with the players individually only strengthens the team as a whole. It is an amazing sight to see when all the messages or skills that you have been communicating or sending have been received and completely understood. And then when they are all put together, this is when you realize a team is born. My next terms are expressive and instrumental talk. Floyd states that some communication scholars have argued that women and men grow up in different speech communities, meaning they have different beliefs about the purpose of communication. These two terms are something that I try to continuously improve upon. I am from a family largely male-dominant, and looking back at my childhood and recalling many of the interactions with the members of my family, much of our communication was that of instrumental talk, interacting with my grandfather and my cousins on a task-oriented basis, what we needed to do to accomplish the day's chores, how to fix the tractor to get the field done. It was very task-oriented. As I grew older, I recognized that at times it seemed that others did not always seem to speak in the manner I was accustomed to. Others talked more expressively. They utilized this means to establish more personal relationships. When I met my wife, I learned really quickly that I needed to adapt my verbal communication. She wasn't the fondest of my task-oriented communication, although unintentional, so I began to understand what it meant to speak in a more expressive way. I think that lesson helped our relationship to evolve into what it is today. The next term that my wife and daughters would say fits me to a T would be language and power. Communication scholars found that on average, American men use more powerful forms of speech than American women, and also that men often talk more than women do. I would have to agree with this. I find myself to be very talkative, as it is a very large portion of my job duties working with patients. At Nationwide, I work in the pediatric unit, and much of what I do is triage and assessing patients and gathering as much information as possible from the patient, usually children, and their parents. At times, such as when I'm away from work and on the ball field, I tend to use more characteristics of powerful speech. I tend to express my opinions more frequently when I feel that the umpires are not playing fair, so to speak, with my girls. I can't deny this at all, as it is me to a fault. My next term I have chosen is self-concepts are enduring but changeable. I have chosen this because I feel that my self-concept has changed a few times as I have grown older and more mature. For me, it is very easy to see how certain factors have affected my self-concept. 3 factors in particular that I feel influence change in my self-concept are my 3 girls. My wife had one of the biggest effects on my self-concept. I have always tried to be a positive person and feel as though I had high self-confidence. But when I met my wife, and as our relationship continued to grow, I noticed that I became even more confident, more sure of who I was, and definitely of who I wanted to be. This self-concept for me continued to strengthen with the birth of my 2 daughters. Each time I realized more and more who I was. I was a husband, a father, and a family man. Next, I explored what makes a family. Floyd states some people may be obvious, such as your parents and your spouses, siblings, your children, and your grandparents. Scholars have agreed that 1 or more than 3 important characteristics make up these relationships, such as genetic ties, legal obligations, and role behaviors, which means that people who act like family. For me, role behaviors are a large portion of my family life. I have siblings that are not blood, but we interact and care for one another and treat each other as family. My next term that I have explored is the types of families. You have your family of origin, which is the family you grew up in. For me, this consists of my mother, older brother, and my grandparents. The next is family of procreation, which is the family we start as adults. This consists of a significant other and or a child raised as one's own. Many people identify with one or both of these two. I myself identify with both. You then have single-parent families, where one adult raises 1 or more children, which reflects my childhood also. The 4th family form, which I relate to the most, is extended family, which includes all of the aforementioned and individuals we consider to be family. I'm sure a few may be able to relate to this as well. My childhood best friend to me is closer as a brother than my blood brother. We've been side by side since childhood, always there no matter what. I am very passionate about the saying, blood makes you relative, but loyalty makes you family. Next, I've explored family rituals. My first thoughts were of the the traditional family rituals, such as people getting together for birthdays and holidays, sitting around, spending a short amount of time, remembering old times, and eating and sharing a few laughs. Growing up, this was a part of the norm for my family of origin, but now that I'm a husband and a father, my family has created our own rituals. Our ritual consists of every week practicing for the next softball tournament, going to hitting and pitching lessons, spending Friday nights planning out our rosters for the weekend, and looking over stats from the previous weekend. Saturday mornings, we're up before the sun rises and on the road to wherever the tournament takes us. The day is filled with wins and losses and strengthening team and family bonds. This is my family's rituals, and I wouldn't have it any other way. The final term that I have chosen to explore is defensiveness. It is defined as a feeling of excessive concern with guarding oneself against the threat of criticism. I have found that the older I have become, the more defensive I get when it comes to my family. I know it's basic human instinct to become defensive when someone criticizes you or a family member. When I was younger, criticism didn't seem to bother me. I actually was more open to it. But it's funny how a little time and a few changes in priorities can change that view rather quickly. I think my first realization that I had changed in this aspect was the first parent-teacher conference I had with a teacher that just wasn't what I would consider up to par. They tried to explain to me that they felt my child lacked attention in the class. I could feel myself becoming defensive and angry. I then realized that I had to take a step back and process what they had said and show them my perspective and what I viewed as the issue in the classroom to successfully be able to manage this situation. As the conference concluded, I realized how quickly I became defensive towards what the teacher was communicating.